The letter sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I opened it. I don't know why I kept walking past it. Maybe I already sensed that whatever was inside would split my life into a before and an after, and I wasn't ready for that yet. I was 29, working 12-hour shifts as a charge nurse at a regional hospital outside Columbus, Ohio, and my before was already exhausting enough. I didn't need an after. The return address said it was from an attorney's office in Savannah, Georgia. The name on the letterhead, Whitmore and Associates, meant nothing to me. Neither did the name of the man whose estate they were handling. My great-uncle Reginald. I had met him exactly twice in my life. Once at my grandmother's funeral when I was 7, and once at a family reunion I barely remembered. He was my grandmother's brother, quiet and a little severe, the kind of man who sat in a lawn chair at the edge of things and watched everyone else have fun. He had died 6 weeks earlier. Apparently, he had no children, no wife, moth, no one close, and he had left me $1.9 million. I read the letter 4 times, standing at my kitchen counter in my scrubs, still smelling like hospital antiseptic, and then I sat down on the floor because my legs stopped working. Not in a dramatic way. They just quit. I sat there with my back against the cabinets and the letter in my hands, and I thought, very clearly, nobody can know about this. I don't know where that thought came from. It arrived fully formed, no deliberation required, like my gut had already done the math while my brain was still catching up. I had seen what money did to families. I had watched it at the nurse's station, reading the stress on people's faces when they came in to handle a sick relative's affairs. I had seen brothers stop speaking over a car. I had seen sisters turn into strangers over a savings account. And that was normal money, insurance payouts, retirement funds. Not this. Not $1.9 million. I called the attorney's office the next morning before my shift. A man named Mr. Whitmore walked me through everything. With a calm, measured voice, he asked if I'd like a referral to a financial advisor. He explained that the estate had already cleared probate, and that the funds would transfer once I provided the necessary documentation. He said I was wise to have questions. He said most people in my position were overwhelmed. I said I was fine. I was not fine. I drove to work and spent the next 8 hours taking blood pressure readings and adjusting IV lines and answering patient call buttons. And the entire time there was this hum underneath everything, this electric low-grade hum that I couldn't tell if it was fear or excitement, or something that didn't have a name yet. On my lunch break, I Googled what to do when you inherit a lot of money. I felt embarrassed doing it, like someone might see. I cleared my search history twice. The financial advisor Mr. Whitmore connected me with was a woman named Ms. Ellison. She had an office in a glass building downtown and a handshake that was firmer than mine. She sat across from me and listened without interrupting while I explained my situation, and when I finished, she folded her hands on the desk and said, "The first thing we're going to do is nothing." She meant, don't spend, don't tell, don't make decisions while the shock is still fresh. She walked me through the concept of a trust, how it could hold assets in a way that separated them from my personal name and protected them from certain legal vulnerabilities. She talked about tax implications, about the importance of a small team, a financial advisor, an estate attorney, a CPA. She said the biggest mistake people made with sudden wealth was moving too fast and talking too soon. I asked her if she thought I should tell my family. She looked at me for a moment, then she said, "That's not a financial question." She was right. And that was the problem. My family was not bad people. I want to be clear about that. Because what happened later could make it seem like they were villains, and they weren't. They were just human. In all the complicated, self-interested, occasionally disappointing ways that humans are human. My mother lived 40 minutes away in the house I grew up in, the same one with the cracked driveway she'd been meaning to fix since I was in high school. She worked part-time at a fabric store and stretched her social security check with a precision that I genuinely admired. We talked on the phone every Sunday. She called me baby girl until I was almost 30, and I let her because it made her happy. My older sister lived in Charlotte with her husband and their 2 kids. Her husband worked in commercial real estate. They had a house with a mudroom and a beverage fridge in the kitchen island, which I know because she mentioned it twice when they bought the place. She and I talked less often than my mother and I did, but we texted, and when things were good between us, they were genuinely warm. She was the kind of person who remembered your coffee order and forgot your birthday. My best friend since college lived 2 neighborhoods over. We had met freshman year in a sociology lecture neither of us wanted to attend, and we had been each other's emergency contacts ever since. She was a graphic designer who worked from home and stress-baked when she had a deadline. I had eaten a lot of very good banana bread during her hard times, and then there was my neighbor across the hall. She was 73 years old, retired, originally from Puerto Rico, and she had lived in our building for longer than I had been alive. When I moved in 6 years ago, she brought me a plate of pastilles and told me where the parking garage camera had a blind spot. She had a toy poodle named Biscuit, who she walked every morning at 6:30, and she knew everyone's business without ever being unkind about it. Those were my people, and I decided, in the weeks after the letter arrived, to tell none of them. I am not going to pretend that keeping the secret was easy. It wasn't. There's a particular loneliness that comes with good news you can't share. It's different from the loneliness of bad news. With bad news, people reach towards you. With secret good news, you have to pretend nothing has changed while everything inside you has rearranged itself. I went through the mechanics of my normal life. I worked my shifts. I stopped for groceries. I watched television on my couch and texted my mother back and said things are good when she asked how I was doing, which was true, and also the most incomplete sentence I had ever spoken. I was about 6 weeks in when the idea came to me. It arrived the way most ideas do, sideways while I was doing something else. I was on the phone with my sister, half listening while she talked about a renovation they were doing to their back deck, when she said casually, "Hey, speaking of money, I've been meaning to ask you about that $800 I lent you when your car needed work." I paused. "I paid that back in March." "Did you?" "I don't think you did. I Venmo'd you. I have the receipt." There was a brief silence. I might be thinking of something else. And then she moved on, back to the deck, back to the contractor quotes, and I stood in my kitchen holding the phone and feeling something settle in my chest like sediment in a glass of water. She wasn't malicious, she probably had gotten confused. But I had that receipt. I had sent it to her the day I paid, and she had never said thank you. That was when I started thinking about what I actually knew about the people in my life. Not what I assumed, not what I hoped, but what I actually knew, and I realized I wasn't sure. The test came to me as a question first. What would they do if I needed them? Not the version of needed them where I was doing fine and just a little short. The version where I was genuinely struggling. The version where helping would cost them something real. I thought about it for 2 more weeks. I talked to no one. I sat with it. And then I decided I needed to know. I started with my sister. I called her on a Tuesday evening after dinner when I knew her husband would be putting the kids to bed and she'd be alone in the kitchen. I had rehearsed what I was going to say. I had also decided to make it real, not a vague story, but something specific and verifiable feeling. I told her that I'd been let go from my job, restructuring, budget cuts. I told her I had about 6 weeks of savings and that I was terrified and that I hated asking, but I needed to borrow $3,500 to cover 2 months of rent while I figured out next steps. There was a pause. "Oh no," she said. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry." And the sympathy was real. I believed it was real. She had a warm voice and she knew how to use it. "I wish we could help," she said, "I really do. But we're so stretched right now with the deck renovation and Callie's braces, and honestly the mortgage rate adjustment hit us harder than we expected." She talked for 4 more minutes. I counted 2. She gave me 3 separate reasons why they couldn't help and 2 suggestions for resources I could look into, including a government website for unemployment benefits that I already knew about because I am a functioning adult who has worked continuously since I was 17. "You're so capable," she said at the end. "You'll figure this out." "You always do." I thanked her. I hung up. I sat on my couch and felt something go quiet inside me that I hadn't realized was still hoping. My mother was next, and that one was harder to design. I couldn't ask my mother for money she didn't have. That felt genuinely cruel. So instead I called her and let the conversation drift toward how I was doing, and when she asked, I told her, gently, carefully, that work had been rough lately and I was feeling financially stressed and a little lost. She listened. She said, "Baby girl, it's going to be okay." She told me about a cousin who had been through something similar and come out fine. She told me to pray about it. She said she wished she could do more. She did not offer to help in any concrete way, which I understood. She didn't have it to give. But she also didn't ask a single follow-up question. She redirected to her own news within 8 minutes. There was no "do you need me to come up there?" Or "let me think about what I can do." Just warmth. And then a pivot and then 15 minutes about the drama at her church's fall committee. I loved her. I still do, but I had my answers. My best friend was the one I was most scared to test because she was the one whose answer mattered most. I texted her instead of calling because I wanted to see how she responded without the pressure of my voice. I said I was having a hard time financially and was a little overwhelmed. I said I didn't need to talk about it necessarily, just wanted her to know. She read it. I watched the red receipt appear. And then, nothing. For 6 hours. When she finally responded, it was a string of heart emojis and "I'm so sorry, girl. That's so hard. Want to get coffee this week and talk?" Not "what do you need?" Not "I have $200, is that useful?" Not even a phone call. We got coffee on Thursday. She spent 40 minutes talking about a difficult client project and a fight she'd had with her boyfriend, and then she said, "So what's going on with you?" And I said I was hanging in there. And she said, "You're so strong," and we hugged in the parking lot and I drove home feeling more alone than I had before I left. The person I almost didn't test was my neighbor, partly because she was 73 and retired, and I knew her fixed income was exactly that, fixed. Partly because testing her felt like a different category of thing, harder to justify. She wasn't family. She wasn't even someone I'd known my whole life. She was just the woman across the hall who saved me a parking spot when I worked nights, and occasionally left soup outside my door when she heard me coughing, but something made me do it anyway. I knocked on her door on a Saturday morning and she opened it with biscuit tucked under one arm. I told her I was sorry to bother her. I told her I'd hit a hard stretch and was a little scared, and that I was trying to figure out if I needed to move somewhere cheaper. I didn't ask for anything. I just told her the truth of the fictional version of my life. She looked at me for a long moment, then she said, "Come in." She sat me down at her kitchen table and made coffee and put a plate of cookies between us, without asking if I wanted any. And then she said, "How bad is it?" I told her, the rehearsed version, the made-up version, but I felt the real fear underneath it anyway, because grief is like that, it finds the cracks. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she got up and went to the small roll-up desk in the corner of her living room. She came back with an envelope. "It's not a lot," she said. "It's $600. I was saving it for my sister's birthday trip, but she'll understand." She slid it across the table. "You pay it back when you can, or don't. It doesn't matter." I stared at that envelope for longer than was probably polite. "I can't take this," I said. "You didn't ask me for it," she said. "I'm giving it to you." "There's a difference," I cried. I hadn't cried once through the entire process. Not when I got the letter, not during the phone calls, not sitting alone on my couch processing what I'd learned about the people I loved. But sitting at her kitchen table with biscuit nosing at my ankle and a plate of cookies going stale between us, I cried. She patted my hand and said, "People show you who they are when you're not worth anything to them. That's the only real test." I didn't tell her she had just described exactly what I was doing. I turned down the $600. I told her an unexpected freelance payment had come through and things were looking up. She seemed skeptical but didn't push. I went back to my apartment and sat with everything I had learned. Here is what I knew. My sister could have helped and chose not to. She had just had their kitchen redone and taken her kids to Disney World in August and refinanced their house at a favorable rate and still managed 4 separate reasons why she couldn't spare $3,500 for her only sister, my best friend, who I had carried through 2 breakups and a family illness and a cross-country move and more banana bread emergencies than I could count. Her response to my crisis had been heart emojis and coffee. And my neighbor, who owed me nothing, who was living on a fixed income, who had her own sister to think about, had gone to her desk and come back with $600 in an envelope and told me I didn't have to pay it back. I made some decisions. The first thing I did was call Ms. Ellison and tell her I was ready to move forward. We set up the trust. We transferred the funds. I worked with a CPA she recommended on the tax implications, which were significant but manageable. The second thing I did was find a financial planner who specialized in real estate. Within 3 months, I had purchased a condo in a neighborhood I liked, in a building with a doorman and good light, and a small balcony I hadn't let myself want before. I did not tell anyone I was moving until the lease on my apartment was almost up. I told my mother I had found a better deal. I told my sister I needed a change of scenery. I told my best friend I was downsizing. None of them asked many questions. The third thing I did was think very carefully about my neighbor. I thought about it for 2 weeks. I didn't want to embarrass her. I didn't want to make her feel like a charity case, because she wasn't one. She was the only person in my life who had shown me, without any motive I could identify, that she would give what she had when someone she cared about needed it. I talked to Ms. Ellison about the best way to give a gift without triggering gift tax issues above the annual exclusion limit. Then I wrote my neighbor a card and enclosed a check for $15,000. The card said, "You've been a better neighbor and a better friend than most people manage to be in a lifetime. This isn't charity, it's what you deserve. Please let your sister take you on the birthday trip. Take a longer one." I slid it under her door on a Wednesday morning before she walked Biscuit. She knocked on my door 20 minutes later. She was wearing her housecoat and her reading glasses, and she had the card in her hand. She didn't say anything for a moment, then she said, "What did you do?" "I got a better job," I said. Turns out things were looking up after all. She looked at me for a long time. I could see her trying to figure out what was true and what wasn't, and I could also see her deciding not to push. "You're a good girl," she said finally. "I learned from you," I said. "I have not told my sister. I have not told my best friend. I have not told my mother, though that one sits heavier than these others, and I revisit it sometimes at night when I can't sleep. My sister called me last spring to tell me they'd finally finished the deck. She sent photos. It looked nice. I said so. My best friend and I still get coffee sometimes. It's comfortable and familiar, and there's a warmth there that I don't think was ever fake. It just had a ceiling I hadn't known about until I hit it. We talk about her clients and her boyfriend and whether oat milk is actually better or just trendier. It's fine. I've adjusted what I expect. My mother still calls every Sunday. I still let her call me baby girl. But the person I have most looked forward to seeing, every single week, is 73 years old and walks a toy poodle named Biscuit at 6:30 in the morning and doesn't ask questions she knows you're not ready to answer. She went to Puerto Rico with her sister in March. She sent me a photo from the beach, both of them in sun hats, squinting into the light, grinning like teenagers. The caption said, "Longer trip. Your fault." I kept that photo. I put it on my refrigerator. There are people in your life who will show up with $600 when they have $601, and there are people who will tell you you're capable and strong and that you'll figure it out, and there are people who will send you heart emojis and ask if you want coffee. I'm not angry at the ones who failed. I'm not sure failed is even the right word anymore. They showed me what they had, and what they had wasn't what I needed, and now I know. What I hadn't expected, what I genuinely could not have predicted when I was sitting on my kitchen floor with that letter in my lap, was that the secret would give me something I didn't know what I was looking for. Not just security, not just freedom, though it gave me that too. It gave me clarity, the kind that doesn't cost anything to maintain once, and in the quiet of my new apartment, on my little balcony, with a cup of coffee and the Columbus skyline doing its ordinary best in the distance, that clarity feels like the realest thing I own.